Okay, after about, I think, almost 7 days, I'm actually back to making a commentary again. I actually had originally planned to continue, like, the commentaries one after another, since the footage was also done one right after another, but I forgot to do that. So, I've forgotten a lot of what happened, but essentially, I am still in the Temple of Arawn, not the tower as of yet. I wish. And, well, I'm pretty much not going to make any more progress in this place from what you saw last time. I'm still going to be stuck, trying to figure out the solution to this floor, and can't figure it out. I don't get it. I mean, this place is ridiculous. I hate it so much. I can't remember how much I complained about it before, so you'll apologize if I end up repeating this, but hate this dungeon. I didn't think it was possible for a dungeon to annoy me this much. The Cave to Arawn and Dragon Warrior 2 doesn't annoy me this much. Dear God. At least the enemies aren't bad. That's good. Because if they were, then I'd be in big trouble. And yeah, the skilled warriors love paralyzing taunt. But then again, why not? He's easily the biggest threat right now. And probably will be for a while. He always has a high attack power, and his spells do a ton of damage. Basically, this game's Super Mage, for all practical purposes. And he's going to be hogging the spotlight as my main mage attacker for quite a while. It is worth noting, though, that his spells, as they go on, do start taking a lot more MP to use. So if there was any con to using taunt, it would probably be that. Then again, by the time you have to rely on those, you will have a lot more MP as a result. So it's not all that bad. You'll just be going through a lot more mage potion. When you run out, anyway. I'm not usually the person that tries to rely on magic in this game, though, because of how little MP you actually get, and how expensive Mage Potion actually can get later on. Yeah, going through some dungeons later on will make you go through like 10,000 gold worth of Mage Potion. So, constantly abusing them is not a solution. Okay. So the only enemy in here that you really need to worry about is the Sylph enemy, because they can really abuse their spells. And I know some of this may be repeats, but it's been so long, I can't remember what I really discussed. And by the time I actually get around to working on these, I don't have time to actually locate the video and watch it again to see what I've talked about. That would take far too long. And my time is pretty limited anyway. By all rights, I should be in bed by now, because of how late it is, but I'm trying to get this done sometime. And trust me, time has been pretty limited around here. So, I gotta do this when I'm able to. Depending on how long this dungeon is actually going to take, will mean a lot. I do plan on trying to keep everything on camera, but if I go through like an hour and 30 minutes one more time and can't do this, then I will probably put on no random battles, and then just figure out the dungeon off screen. That's the kind of thing I really don't want to rely on, but I will in very desperate situations. Because this is really one of those dungeons where it's strongly based on luck with me. Since I don't want to use a guide to figure this out, because I kind of find that cheating anyway. If anything, I want to find the solution by myself. I will cheat to that end, but I will not cheat to figure it out from someone else. That kind of takes away the fun of puzzles like these. If you use a guide to figure it out, it's like you're basically playing the game, but with someone else guiding you the entire time. And I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. I know I had to do it with my grandma before, with some of her RPGs, and it's pretty boring. Or at least I would think it would be. Because when I've had used guides before, like with maps and whatever, it gets pretty annoying. Because with Mega Man Battle Network, when I played it, I had to constantly rely on maps so that I wasn't driven nuts by the sheer amount of random battles, and it got old pretty fast. So, ever since then, I've tried to get away from playing games that are very heavy on large dungeons. Mega Man Battle Network is famous about this, having net dungeons that are huge and have winding paths. And that it got to the point where I just couldn't stand playing the series anymore. The only one I can even tolerate anymore is Mega Man Network Transmission. And really, the only reason I can tolerate that one is it's more like the normal Mega Man formula, so it's not quite as bad. Ugh, other than that, jeez. And it's not even that I despise the games themselves, I just get bored way too quick, because some of those dungeons can take forever to navigate unless you're using a map. Which, unless you're doing a Let's Play like Arawn Mithril is, I really don't see the point of that. I refuse using maps while playing Beyond the Beyond. Excuse me. It just irritates me when I've had to do that. I think the only time I've ever done it, and I don't think I'll do it this time, is later on you come to a dungeon that has several areas to it. And it's kind of like a Battle Network dungeon in itself, because of how long it actually takes to get through it. And when you leave, you have to start from the very beginning. There's no shortcuts you can take. Well, I take it back. You can use escape in one segment of the place to take a slight shortcut, but the shortcut doesn't actually help till you're at the end of the dungeon and get a special key item. So, until that happens, you're pretty much stuck going through the entire 3 areas, and considering how powerful the enemies are in said area, this can be quite taxing. So, I think that's one time where I've actually used a map, just so I have enough resources to make it through the entire thing. I'm gonna try not to use a map this time around, and see if I can manage it. One thing that'll probably help is at least this time around, I'm having a lot more trouble progressing through each area. So I'm probably gonna have less trouble going through each new area because I'll be at a higher level. Or at least I assume it's going to be easier. I mean, let's face it, I'm, what, level 16, 17 already? And I haven't even lifted Simpson's Curse yet. That's pretty high level for this area. If I remember right, I think one of the guides that came with the game, that the recommended level for actually breaking Samson's curse, I think, is like level 18, 19. And we still have a few areas left before that happens. Though, just to give a slight spoiler, usually I don't aim to break Samson's curse till I'm at least in my low 20s in levels. Because there are a couple really good spells that you get around that level that I really want first. Because you have to go through a couple of difficult areas before that happens, and having those magic spells helps a lot. I don't think you need them per se, but they do help quite considerably. Because of the speed of the enemies, if you get into the wrong groups, then they can murder you pretty fast. Especially if 4 or 5 really fast enemies show up. Then you usually don't have time to do anything before everyone goes groggy. Which I've actually had happen to me on a number of occasions. At least in the past. The last time I played, I was doing a high speed run, where I made sure I was always getting speed from levels, including taunt, which took forever, mind you. So I didn't have as much of a problem, though by the time I got to endgame, it became really cheap, to where none of the monsters were really doing anything to me, because I had such strong magic that because I was going before every enemy, they weren't even getting a single turn. And because of that, I try not to rely on it too much. At least later on in the game I don't. Yeah, there was a point in the game that the game essentially changes quite a bit. And when that happens, it's pretty much a whole new ball game. And when you get to this point, the game actually becomes a whole lot easier. I won't mention why, but having access to better shops at this point in the game goes a long way to explaining why the game isn't as hard, though. The equipment that you get in the beginning of the game really doesn't match up with the game's current difficulty, and will probably explain why as many people are having problems with it. But later on in the game, this problem kind of resolves itself, and as a result, the game's not as hard compared to what you're used to, and it will feel very, very simple in comparison. I don't know how many other games are like this, but I've played a couple that have had very weird balancing issues. Both the Logaia games, one for PS1 and 2 for PS2, are both very bad about balance issues. Legend of Logaia is bad about the game being way too rough at certain moments, and Logaia 2 Duel Saga is very simple. Maybe not so much in the beginning, but once you start getting a full party together, the game almost gets to a point where it's a complete joke. There's just nothing the enemy can do to stop you, since you're killing most enemies in one hit anyway. And your magical abilities in Duel Saga are downright overpowered as crap. To anyone who hasn't played any of these two games, I won't give too much information, but the balancing issue is definitely there. Also, there are other games too that are very bad about balancing issues. I think the one game that a lot of people experience this like this is Final Fantasy VIII. When this game first came out, a lot of people were accustomed to how Final Fantasy VII played, and when they played 8 and had to get used to a new type of gameplay system, they really didn't know what to make of it at first, and, well, a lot of people were getting their butt kicked in it, because they didn't understand that this particular game wasn't so much about leveling up. That actually would kill you. It was actually just more about strategizing, collecting magic, and using it to your advantage while progressing through the game. Heck, if anything, leveling up was actually frowned upon, since by collecting magic early on, you could essentially make your people unbeatable. So fighting really wasn't all that necessary for the most part. I mean, I guess leveling up kind of contributed. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but I don't care. But leveling up helped, but it wasn't really necessary. I know people that have been in the game at like level 4 or 5, so it was pretty simple. But this is one of the games that had really bad balancing issues, because if you leveled up too much, you were getting your butt kicked, and if you leveled up too little, it was very easy. Because leveling up is how bosses actually got harder in this game. Most people recommend it to be at gain a few levels when you go to each new area, so that the game gets harder as you progress. But a lot of people these days usually don't do that and just stay at a low level all the time, so that the game doesn't ever get any real challenge to it, which I think is personally kind of stupid, but whatever. People have different play methods, I guess. I can't think of any other games off the top of my head that had this issue, but they're definitely out there. As a matter of fact, it's very hard to find games that actually have a moderate difficulty curve to it. A game that starts out pretty decent and keeps that moderate difficulty pace the entire time through. It's so late. I cannot think properly in this small brain I have. I suppose Lufia 2, Rise of Sinistrals for Super NES was pretty good about it. People have complained in the past that it starts out a little too difficult, but I never really had much of a problem with it. It was pretty decent. There were only a couple bosses that I think could have been nerfed a little bit, but I don't think they were ever so hard that I had a lot of problems with them. And the game certainly never got very easy. It felt very balanced. Just be careful not to rush through it too fast, otherwise you won't have the levels you'll need. Because when I try to accuse a game of something, I try to make sure that it's not the game's fault. Or let me rephrase that, I try to make sure it's not my fault and I'm just not aware of it. Because I have done that before, where I've accidentally accused the game of something that I did, and I just didn't want to admit it. Because, believe it or not, this is actually a big problem with a lot of gamers. Because a lot of people hate on games that don't have a lot of good graphics, because it doesn't really follow their preference of gaming, so they automatically hate it because of that, and they say that it shouldn't be out there at all, and that people don't like this type of game. this is obviously bullcrap because a lot of people do have different preferences, and everyone is open to their own preference. And I do believe games should be made in all categories, just so everyone has the chance to play the type of game they like. However, there are some video game companies that try their darndest to just appeal to the hardcore crowd. I think it's called mainstream now, and because of that, a lot of genre lovers tend to be ignored. Like, the biggest examples, I think, are people that like turn-based RPGs, like Beyond the Beyond. That type of crowd is usually shafted these days, since a lot of RPG gamers are starting to cater more towards the action RPGs or strategy RPGs, which are a lot more strategic in the way you have to play them. Or in the action RPG's case, it just requires to have better reflexes for the most part. The problem is that not everyone can play these types of games very well. Because back when my grandma was still playing video games, both action RPGs and strategy RPGs are the type of games she wouldn't be able to play. Because she no longer has the reflexes to really play action games very well. And she never considered herself smart enough to play the strategy RPGs. So she'd be kind of out of luck in today's day and age for sure. I'm trying to think of other genres that have been kind of ignored too. I can't think of all that many. I know turn-based RPGs are the biggest culprit of this. I guess puzzle games in a way are kind of shafted. Not many people are making that great of them. Most puzzle games made nowadays tend to be more along the lines of games like Tetris, I guess. You'll occasionally get a game that's like that, but you don't get any puzzle games that are like Lemmings, or like, what else? I can't remember. There's another game that was like Lemmings, but I can't figure it out. But you know the type of game I'm talking about. The game that required you to think ahead. I think the closest thing to that would probably be tower defense style games, I guess. But even that, I think the closest thing that people have made related to tower defense is the Crystal Defenders games that Square Enix comes out with. And when was the last time we heard anything about one of those? I know it's been a while. So they may just give up on it. And if that happens, well, you can say goodbye to anyone else that wants to really make any ingenious puzzle-style games. I believe they've actually created puzzle adventure to fit that genre, but they may as well not. It's not like anyone is making those types of games anymore. Huh? Did I use escape? No, I didn't. Okay. Yeah, I do get that chest down there before I end up having to leave this place, but it's not the chest I wanted. It just has a somewhat rare item. But given the choice, I think I just leave it here, and then come back for it later. Really, if I wanted the chest that badly, I would just put in no random battles and come back for it later. I'd probably, when I get to this floor, I'd probably show the solution on camera, since it wouldn't be all that hard. I don't think. With the battles gone, going through here would probably be a whole lot faster, since I could pay more attention to the different solutions I'm using, so I know what not to do. But because of the battles, I constantly forget what I've tried and what I haven't. That's the biggest problem, really. Anyway, going back to what games tend to be ignored in the main stream of things. I know that there are certain type of games that people really like. I can't remember what they're called. I think it's the adventure style series that just aren't made anymore. I know they used to be famous on computer. Since Sierra used to put out a lot in the way of adventure games that people loved, like King's Quest. That was a really popular one. But they haven't come out with anything in recent times. Probably because they've run by a different company who's more interested in other projects. So that's pretty sad. Especially if you've ever seen Todd Dugan on That Guy with the Glasses. He talks a lot about the different Sierra franchises. And it's pretty interesting what he had to say on it. Oh boy, we still have like 20 minutes left on this. Ugh, darn it. It's pretty boring when I have to link up all these different discussions just because I'm stuck doing the same thing for over an hour and 40 minutes. It's ridiculous. No, an hour and 50 minutes. Since my last video was about an hour long. More than an hour long, actually. It's like an hour and a minute, if I recall. Oh, God. I did learn something from one of my other friends. Let's see, what's her name? It's one of Kevin's friends? I can't remember, but we were talking about different anime that I would be interested in watching. I don't remember if I told anyone, but I was thinking of rewatching Sailor Moon, because back when I first watched it, I didn't have the kind of mindset you really need with watching an anime like that. I was more into DBZ, stuff like DBZ at the time, and that's not really the kind of mindset when watching a show like Sailor Moon. It's very different. It caters to a totally different crowd. I didn't know that at the time, mind you. So when that happened, I was just not into it, and I looked at it with a very biased opinion. I pretty much compared it to being an anime just for girls, and that I shouldn't be watching it. But looking back at it now, I think I judged it a little harshly. And I have watched a couple of episodes so far, and it's not as bad as I remember it. At least not in the first few episodes. I haven't seen that. It is very much a sign of the times, though. The acting is very... not cookie cutter, but it's very amateurish. At least from what I can tell. You can tell they probably didn't have really experienced voice actors or actresses with this one, and it kind of shows. But I'm not the kind of person to really complain about that. I know not all studios can afford the really good voice actors. Especially when this was actually being made. This was back when anime wasn't exactly that popular. In America, it was still growing. So I can forgive a lot of that on the sign of the times, really. And the storyline to this is not the best in the world, but it's not the worst either. I've definitely seen worse anime than this. Heck, I'd probably rather watch this than I would an anime like Naruto or possibly One Piece, because you see, why a lot of people hate Sailor Moon is because it's a magical girl style anime, and those types tend to be judged pretty harsh because of what they are. But what a lot of people need to understand is that magical girl style anime in Japan was technically aimed at children, mostly little girls. Though, when people look at a show like Magic Knight Rare or Sailor Moon, people judge it pretty harshly based on that, but that's not really fair. Anime in Japan is taken a lot more seriously than in America. And when I say seriously, I mean very seriously. Stuff that is aimed towards little kids in Japan, over here, we see as pretty dark for the most part. And isn't it really something you'd think when you want to expose something to your kids? This would not be the first type of show you'd have in mind. But that's because in Japan, shows tend to be taken a lot more seriously, and kids are more adaptable to the type of things you show them. Kids in America, for the most part, tend to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Pretty, their minds are pretty much sugar-coated, for the most part, by parents, because a lot of parents these days don't think their kids can handle half of what they show them, because they're afraid it will, not break their minds, but break their spirit, and they're afraid that they will have mental problems because of it. I've never agreed with this, because of what I grew up with. I grew up with Disney films, particularly the very dark ones like Sleeping Beauty, Beauty and the Beast, even movies like Bambi, which had some very dark moments in them, and there was nothing particularly wrong with me that affected me throughout my life. So I think that this philosophy is bunk. Kids are not as weak as a lot of Americans tend to think they are. They're a lot smarter than people give them credit for, too, because a lot of people seem to think that kids are usually pretty stupid, and that's why they tend to give them these really stupid cartoons that they make nowadays. Because their excuse is, they're kids, we don't need to try to make anything really entertaining, because they're just going to watch anything we give them anyway. And while this is true to an extent, kids do like things that a lot of adults find pretty childish. That's not really an excuse, though, for a lack of effort. I've had this problem come up before with a lot of cartoons I like to watch on TV. I really can't anymore. And I'm not that fussy. I'll watch anything as long as it's a little entertaining. But some of these shows they're making now are so dubbed down for kids that I can't enjoy it anymore. It is so silly and ridiculous and dumb that I think most cartoon channels these days are pretty much PBS channels. It's really gone to that extent too, because so many cartoons are geared towards the finger painting age audience, and I think I really blame this on why TV has really gone as bad as it did. Because I think even the very young kids are starting to get tired of it, because while very young children are very adaptable to different types of entertainment. A lot of kids also tend to want to watch it with their parents too, especially if they're really close to their parents. And when a cartoon is as stupid as these are, parents can't watch it with their kids because of just how stupid it is. They're bored out of their minds watching these types of shows. And if I know them very well, they probably think of excuses on not to actually do it. At least some parents would. Because I know Saiyan Cat on YouTube as a kid. And I don't know how many cartoons he actually watches, but I honestly can't see Saiyan actually sitting... Okay. I don't see him actually sitting down with his kid watching one of these very dumb cartoons and actually being entertained by it. I just can't see that, personally. And that's not like I blame him either. It would be terrible for me to have to go through that. I'm not even joking about that either. But there's that to consider, and I honestly think that's why anime is personally getting as famous as it is, because it's true. I mean, anime being made nowadays is a lot more respectful than a lot of American entertainment these days. Because I honestly believe that the Japanese have a lot more understanding on what makes a cartoon popular than we do anymore. Because in order for people to be interested, you have to actually put actual effort into what you're producing. And I just don't see that anymore. Not in America, at least. Because and it's not from lack of trying either. I mean, I've been more than accepting of American television, and I've tried for years to try and get reinvested into a lot of the new cartoons coming out, but it's just not working. Aside from anime itself, I don't think anything else is really taken seriously. And America, and my friend Kevin actually made a joke about this. He actually wrote, him and his friend created kind of a mini fanfic type of thing, or an RP, where they were controlling female characters that were in American television cartoons, and they were actually complaining that they're not getting views anymore because people aren't watching their stupid crap. So they were thinking of moving to anime instead, so that they're actually getting viewed. And they actually do get moved to anime, but if you know anything about anime, women aren't exactly treated with the best of respect. So when they were moved, they were hit with the fan service stick, and they all had big boobs and everything, and very weird body shapes, and it didn't take them long to figure out that this is really uncomfortable for them, and they didn't like it. But they also knew that if they went back to American television, they wouldn't get the views they needed to become popular. And so they figured that this was the only way they could actually get any entertainment. So they did try their best to play their parts, but there's a thing about most female fantasy characters that I don't think a lot of people know. Have you ever seen an anime in Japan? And when I mean fantasy characters, I mean really, really bad fan service. How often are these characters used? Like, in the story? Really think hard about that. Most fantasy characters are usually designed this way just so men will ogle at them, essentially. They wanted to get the male fan base. And on the anime, and this is usually how they choose to do it. It's a tried and true method. But just because they do this doesn't exactly mean that they plan these characters to be useful. Heck, in most cases, you see them in like the first few episodes, but then they either put the focus on more fan servicey characters, or they'll just switch the focus off them completely and just focus on the actual plot. And once that happens, you don't usually see these characters for a while. At least until the next season starts or something. Which honestly makes me make the question, why are these characters here? I mean, it's one thing if you want to have fantasy characters that are supposed to look sexy, I guess, and get the male fan base in on your show, but why do you make them useless? Wouldn't it make more sense for them to be actually useful characters and actually be in the anime more often? I don't know. This seems kind of stupid. And this was actually brought out in the RP that they were doing. The girls actually figured out that while they were popular, they were hardly ever in the anime, and they were very depressed by this because they had to deal with looking and feeling this way for nothing. And yeah, I know, this would never happen, but I think this does bring out a few good points, though, that I really don't like. Oh, by the way, I did pick up the Fire Drake phase in that chest from the Temple of Arawn, and that will become useful much later. I'm selling the healing herbs because they're really not that useful. And I'm going to be sticking with herbs for the rest of the time. And because we actually only have a few minutes left, I'm going to cut this short until next time. Do keep that in mind, though. Fanservice characters, in terms of storyline, are basically useless, and you'll probably never see them that often. I just find that to be really stupid. It's like they're designing all these characters for virtually nothing. I mean, it takes a long time to design these characters, and they're just kind of cast aside after a while. It's kind of sad when you think about it, really. But, oh well, not much we can do about that. Kevin's little sister Sue did laugh at how true this actually was, because while she said fan service doesn't really bother her, she did say that the way they use it is pretty stupid, because even she noticed at times that the characters that look like that are there for virtually no reason most of the time. And she does occasionally get kind of a feel of sexism from this. Like, because they're women most of the time, they're not given good roles in anime. And she does get insulted occasionally because of that. And I can certainly understand why. That is pretty stupid. And I will now take this time to show off some new spells that I got, which I believe are Titan level 1 and Ice level 2. I can't remember which one I used first. Oh god, this is not a good battle for this. Okay, Titan level 1 is pretty good. You summon a rock giant to drop rocks on enemies. It does about 10 more damage than Fire Drake, but it costs more MP. Later on, I'll probably be using that a lot. It doesn't have an elemental affinity to it, I don't think, but that can be worked to your advantage too, because it works good on everything, so that's pretty nice. And since Edward's new spell affects a group, I need to wait for a group to appear before I can test it properly. And I think that takes a little while, actually. This isn't exactly the best place to be using these spells, because in the desert, a lot of battles are against just one foe. So that kind of sucks. Okay, people, come on. Give me a group battle so I can hurry up and test this spell for the folks. Ugh. Really? They're separate? Come on. Now the game's just trolling me. Oh well. Could be worse, I guess. I did get a level out of that. Can't remember who got it, though. I wasn't paying attention. But... oh, I think it was Annie. I've been getting a lot of strength on my levels, as I've noticed. That's usually pretty uncommon. Okay, this'll work. They're weak against fire, not ice, but okay. Hopefully they don't run. Okay, they don't. It looks a lot like Ice Breath he's shooting out of his mouth, and it does a lot of damage. Like, 20 damage normally, but if you get the random number generator to work with you, or if the enemy's weak against ice, it will do even more. It's pretty useful. However, later on, you'll see that this spell will be used against me. So that's really annoying. But that is where I'll be calling it quits for tonight. Next time, hopefully I can get out of this freaking dungeon. See you guys later.